The air crackled with anticipation. Dr. Emily Abberton hunched over her workbench, eyes blazing with triumph. Years of tireless research, countless failed experiments, all culminating in this moment. In her trembling hand, she held a vial filled with a shimmering opalescent liquid, the elixir of youth. Abberton had finally cracked the code. She had successfully isolated the enzymes responsible for cellular regeneration and combined them into a potent serum. This wasn't a mere wrinkle remover, a temporary fix. This was a complete biological rewind, capable of turning back the hands of time itself. The implications were staggering. Exhaustion tugged at her, yet her mind buzzed with excitement. Human trials were the next step. The thought sent a thrill through her, mingled with a shiver of apprehension. This was uncharted territory, a step into the unknown. But Abberton was never one to shy away from a challenge. A name flitted through her mind: Dr. Walter May, her old colleague, her former friend, and the man who held the key to fulfilling a promise made long ago. A ghost of a smile played on her lips. It was time to call in a favor.
Walter, darling, it's me, Emily.
Abberton's voice was saccharine sweet, a stark contrast to the steely glint in her eyes. Across town, Dr. Walter May frowned at the unexpected call. Years had passed since they last spoke, their once close friendship fractured by unspoken resentments and diverging ambitions.
Emily, this is unexpected. What can I do for you?
Walter's tone was wary, tinged with a hint of curiosity. He had always admired Abberton's intellect, even if he questioned her methods at times. He listened with growing incredulity as she described her breakthrough.
A youth serum? Emily, are you sure about this? It sounds highly experimental, not to mention ethically dubious.
Don't be such an old stick in the mud, Walter. This could change everything. I need someone discreet, someone brilliant to help me test it. Who better than you?
Walter hesitated, a knot of unease forming in his stomach. He had always been cautious, a stark contrast to Abberton's reckless ambition. Yet a part of him, the part that yearned for recognition, for a place in the annals of scientific history, felt a flicker of temptation. Unbeknownst to Walter, Abberton harbored a hidden agenda. Years ago, in the flush of their early friendship, Walter had promised to father a child with her. A promise made in jest, he had thought. A promise she had never forgotten, and now she intended to collect. The first sign was subtle, a newfound spring in his step, an unexpected surge of energy. Walter dismissed it as the placebo effect, a trick of the mind. He had given Abberton a blood sample for testing, but refused to take the serum himself. He was too cautious, too aware of the potential risks, or so he thought. He hadn't noticed the slight tremor in Abberton's hand as she drew his blood, hadn't seen the glint in her eye as she injected a tiny diluted dose of the serum into his vial. She assured him it was a harmless marker, a way to track the serum's efficacy. He, ever the trusting fool, believed her. As days turned into nights, the changes became more pronounced. The lines on Walter's face seemed to soften, his reflection in the mirror less etched with time. He chalked it up to stress, to the long hours he was keeping in the lab. Denial was a powerful drug. Then came the aches, the strange, unfamiliar pangs in his bones. He felt lighter somehow, as if gravity itself had loosened its grip. He started waking up with a disconcerting sense of disorientation, his dreams filled with half-remembered memories of childhood. One morning, he woke to find his reflection staring back at him with youthful eyes, eyes that belonged not to a man in his prime, but to a boy on the cusp of adolescence. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through him. The serum was working, and he was regressing.
Reverse!
The phone clattered to the floor, Walter's hand trembling too violently to hold it steady. His voice, when he finally found it, was high-pitched, frantic. The measured composure of a scientist replaced by the raw terror of a man hurtling backward through time.
Emily! God, Emily, you have to help me. The serum, it's working. I'm getting younger. I can't stop it.
On the other end of the line, Abberton listened, a satisfied smile curving her lips. His panic was a symphony to her ears, a testament to her genius. She had anticipated his fear, had factored it into her grand plan.
Walter, darling, calm down. Tell me exactly what's happening.
Her voice was a soothing balm, deliberately measured to counteract his rising hysteria. He clung to her words, a drowning man grasping at a lifeline. He stammered out a garbled explanation, his voice cracking with the strain of holding back a sob.
I feel strange, Emily. Like I'm shrinking. My clothes are too big, and I can't remember. Things are fuzzy.
His voice trailed off, his mind already starting to fray at the edges. Abbyton allowed a beat of silence to stretch between them, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Then, with feigned reluctance, she played her trump card.
Walter, there's something I haven't told you. There's an antidote, a way to reverse the process.
The lab was a blur of frantic movement as Walter, now a gangly teenager trapped in the throes of reverse puberty, frantically searched for the antidote. His movements were clumsy, uncoordinated. He felt like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by an unseen hand.
Abbyton watched him from the doorway, her arms crossed, a detached observer to his escalating panic. Each panicked breath he took, each desperate plea that tumbled from his lips, fueled her own twisted sense of control.
Where is it, Emily? Where's the antidote?
His voice cracked, the voice of a boy on the verge of manhood, yet tinged with the fear of a child facing the unknown. He spun around, his eyes wide and desperate, searching the lab with a frantic intensity that spoke of dwindling time.
Patience, darling.
She had carefully orchestrated this moment, had planned for every eventuality. The antidote was within easy reach, tantalizingly close, yet just out of his grasp. She enjoyed watching him squirm, seeing the fear contort his features as he regressed further, his mind a swirling vortex of fading memories and childish terror. He was down on his knees now, the once brilliant scientist reduced to a whimpering child, his face streaked with tears. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading for a reprieve, a shred of mercy. But Abbyton's heart, hardened by years of thwarted ambition and a desire for revenge, remained untouched.
Emily, please.
Walter's small voice echoed through the vast lab, his plea barely audible above the hum of machinery and the frantic thumping of his own heart. He was just a child now, his once brilliant mind reduced to a swirling confusion of fear and fading memories. He watched, his lower lip trembling as Abbyton approached. Her white coat seemed to shimmer, her shadow stretching out like a predatory bird about to engulf its prey. In her hand, she held a vial filled with a familiar opalescent liquid, the antidote. Hope, fragile as a newborn butterfly, fluttered in his chest. He reached out a chubby hand, his fingers grasping at empty air.
Emily, I'm scared. Please make it stop.
Abbyton leaned down, her face a mask of cold amusement.
Scared, are you, Walter? Good, you should be.
She brought the vial closer, letting him see his distorted reflection in its curved surface. For a fleeting moment, he dared to believe that she would relent, that she would release him from this terrifying regression. And then, with a swift, deliberate movement, she tossed the vial over her shoulder. It smashed against the far wall, the precious liquid splattering across the floor like shattered dreams.
No!
Walter's wail, raw and primal, echoed through the lab, bouncing off the walls and mocking his helplessness. He scrambled towards the shattered remnants of the vial, his small hands desperately trying to scoop up the spilled liquid.
Why?
He choked out, tears streaming down his face, leaving clean tracks through the grime of regression. He looked up at Abbyton, his eyes wide with betrayal and a dawning, terrifying understanding.
Why, Emily? Why?
Abbyton regarded him with a chilling detachment, her expression devoid of remorse. Instead, a disturbing satisfaction played around her lips, a hint of something dark and possessive lurking beneath her composed facade.
You promised me, Walter. Years ago, you promised me a child.
She crouched down in front of him, her shadow enveloping him like a shroud. He shrank back, her proximity amplifying the fear that pulsed through his veins. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own rapidly regressing body, at the mercy of a woman who had once been his friend, his confidant, the woman who was now his tormentor. The days that followed were a blur. Walter, his mind regressing in tandem with his body, retained only flashes of lucidity, terrifying glimpses of awareness trapped within the confines of his infantile form. He was a prisoner in a gilded cage, Abbyton's opulent home transformed into his prison. She showered him with toys and clothes, babbling to him in a sing-song voice that grated on his nerves. He hated the way she looked at him, her eyes filled with a disturbing mix of possessiveness and something akin to love? It was a grotesque parody of parenthood, a twisted mockery of the life he had envisioned for himself. He was a science project, a living doll. Abbyton's chance to play at motherhood with the man who had dared to refuse her all those years ago. There were times when he would catch glimpses of his reflection in a mirror, a chubby-cheeked baby with eyes that held a wisdom far beyond his years. Those eyes, filled with a silent, pleading terror, mirrored his own. He was trapped, his mind a terrifying battleground between the fading intellect of a brilliant scientist and the burgeoning consciousness of a child. And the worst part, he knew with a chilling certainty that Abbyton had planned it all along. Abbyton was obsessed. Walter, now a gurgling, crawling infant, was the sole focus of her existence. The lab, once her sanctuary, lay abandoned, her groundbreaking research gathering dust. She documented his every move, charting his regression with a meticulousness that bordered on the fanatical. She talked to him constantly, narrating her every thought, her every ambition. He was her confidant, her captive audience, the unwilling recipient of her twisted affections.
You see, darling, Mommy had to do it. You left me no choice.
He hated that word, mummy. It felt like a violation, a grotesque appropriation of a term that held no meaning in their twisted reality. He was not her child. He was her victim. He watched her, his baby blue eyes sharp with an intelligence she refused to acknowledge as she paced the room, her frustration palpable. Her hair, once her crowning glory, was now streaked with grey, her face etched with worry lines. Her own biological clock was ticking, a constant reminder of the time she was wasting, the years slipping through her fingers. One day, a change. Abbyton appeared at his crib, a triumphant gleam in her eyes, a syringe filled with a familiar opalescent liquid clutched in her hand.
Time to stop the clock, darling.
She crooned, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and something akin to fear. He watched her approach, his small hand instinctively raising to shield his face. He knew what that liquid was, knew that it held the power to halt his regression, to freeze him in this infantile state. A fate, he realized with a chilling certainty, that was far more terrifying than the prospect of fading into oblivion. She administered the injection, her touch lingering on his skin. He felt a jolt, a strange buzzing sensation that spread through his tiny body, and then silence. The regression stopped. He was trapped, his mind fully alert and aware, imprisoned within the confines of his baby self. Abbyton gazed down at him, her eyes filled with a disturbing satisfaction.
Now, darling, we can finally be a family.
He stared back at her, his baby blue eyes filled with a wisdom and a sorrow that belied his age. He was trapped, forever frozen in this infantile state, Abbyton's eternal baby, a living testament to her twisted obsession and his own stolen life. The years stretched ahead, an endless, terrifying expanse of forced dependence and stolen potential. His laughter, when it came, was a hollow, chilling sound, the sound of despair, the sound of defeat.